Hello, I'm Jared.
And I'm Ebony, and this is his
And hers.
Warhammer 40K.
Yay! Today we are discussing a Warhammer Horror novel called The Oubliette by JC Stearns. Yeah. This was a shorter novel.
It was pretty short.
We decided it was around Halloween when we started this.
Do the spooks.
Yeah, so we'd flip back to Warhammer Horror for a time.
Yeah.
And see how this went. And it's pretty good.
Yeah.
You want to give a synopsis of it?
Sure. So a planetary governor named Ashiel is having a funeral for her father, who was the planetary governor, and she is going to take his place. So he just died. She's about to become the planetary governor, and then we get a lot of sort of planet level interpolitics between noble houses. The planet is called Shokin.
Shokin.
And
has an interesting Irish spelling to it.
Ceocan, Shokin. Yeah. And so her father has died. Her brother Henrik, who went away to school to become an arbiter, is back home, and they're having this funeral for her dad. And we get introduced to another noble family, which is really the rival for Ashiel's family, the Van Niessens. The mom is Venetians.
Yeah.
I don't know. The mom is Asilia Van Niessen, and she has a daughter, Irina, and a son, Tanzeg. And their family's real snaky. They're involved
They're all such
snaky
classic assholes.
Yeah, they're very slimy, snaky type people. They clearly, everyone on Shokin is aware that they're involved in all of the illegal activity on Shokin. And so Ashiel and her father, who died before her, have sort of been trying to keep the Van Niessens out of power.
Yep.
But she's kind of young to be planetary governor. She doesn't have a husband, which is apparently a problem. And so the Van Niessens are starting to enact this plan to get rid of Ashiel's family, which are the Matkosens.
The Matkosens, yeah.
And so
there's Matkosens.
Matkosens, yeah. So there's an attempt made on Ashiel's life, and an assassin tries to kill her. This assassin is named Lestrovsky,
yeah.
And in the process of him chasing her through her sort of familial mansion, she finds this hidden door to a basement underground area.
Oubliette.
Yes, which is called an oubliette. And if you don't know, the definition of an oubliette is a hole in the ground that you put a prisoner in to trap them and or torture them.
Mm-hmm.
And the prisoner / tortured being in the oubliette in the Matkosen house is Jasubiel, who is a mandrake.
Well, so you don't really know what Jasubiel is.
She thinks he's some sort of demon.
Yeah, like a demon. The locals refer to it as a skitterling.
Yeah.
Which I think is a pretty interesting term.
Yeah.
One thing this book does exceptionally well is build the world.
Mm-hmm.
The world of Shokin is so well developed for what is basically a backwater agri world.
Yeah.
That is by far the biggest positive of this book.
Yeah, it's super well developed.
You get such a great feel for the current climate of Shokin and also the history of Shokin. And if JC Stearns wanted to write other books, they should all definitely be set on Shokin.
Yeah, it's great. There's all this stuff that we're not talking about because it's not super pertinent to the story, but they have this very cool I'm gonna call it a congress, but that's not what it's called. It's called the Grievenet, and there's Margreaves, Landgreaves, and another and Greaves.
No, you have them in the reverse order.
Yeah.
Greaves was the low one. Landgreaves and Margreaves, I think
is the highest.
Basically,
it doesn't matter.
3 different levels to determine where your noble family sits in things.
Yeah, and all noble families have representatives in the Grievenet, and that is a thing that's passed down familially. Mm-hmm. And then there's the planetary governor, and so this doesn't really have any bearing on the story, but they're trying to find a place to house some refugees from somewhere else on Shokin that have been displaced.
What a cool scene that really doesn't mean
anything. Yeah, but you get a little bit of a flavor for what each house is and what each individual grieve is and you also find that Ashiel has sort of allies that she's not super aware of yet.
Ostap, who's a member of the lower household
But he really believes in sort of bettering Shokin and sort of the ideal of the Matkuson family, and he also sees that
he hates the
he hates the Van Niessens,
the Van Niessens.
And there's a bunch of other families that are aligned with the Van Niessens, so it gets very Game of Thrones-y. And it doesn't really have anything to do with the horror part of the story, but it sets up that she is under this pressure, and so of course when someone tries to kill her, she starts thinking it's probably a rival. In the Grievenet.
A lot of discussions of the political fallout involved with the assassinations, involved with her movement, how to sort of interact in politics, the way you have to speak,
a lot about
what
her
is
training
threats. This is.
It's very good.
This is a political thriller novel disguised as a horror novel.
Yeah, it's not that scary.
It is. If as just a horror novel, this is probably a 4 out of 10 for me. As a political thriller,
maybe it's 6 or 7. Yeah.
No, I'd go higher.
Okay.
I do 8.5.
You
or
do
9.
love a political
thriller.
Yeah,
I love the political side of this is great, not scary though.
Yeah. Some of the scenes are scary, like the scene where she finds Jasubiel in the Oubliette while Lostrovsky is trying to kill her. There's a lot of tension in that scene. You don't really know what's happening. She doesn't really know what's happening. She finds this thing that she thinks is a demon, and it's I'll save you, but you have to
you have to make
blood
a
sacrifice.
Yeah,
and she's
sacrifice.
What? And she's I don't have anyone to sacrifice. And he was just a little bit of your finger. So she cuts off her own finger, and it destroys Lostrovsky.
Also, I'm pretty sure she cut off the first digit of her right index finger.
I thought it was the left.
Was it left?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Even still, I would not have started there.
I thought it was a pinky, not an index.
No, she definitely didn't. She definitely did a major finger.
Oh, I thought it was a pinky first, from the fingernail to the first knuckle.
It was a major finger because she fires a gun later, and she's I had to adjust her hand to use it. I was why would you do?
I just thought it was weird because you didn't have any bot. But I guess that makes sense.
It was probably one of it was an important finger.
Oh, well, that sucks. I would have chosen the pinky, but she made that poor choice. But it works out because Jasubiel's free, and it frees him from the Oubliette, and he kills Lostrovsky for her in a very extreme manner. There are bits of Lostrovsky all over her basement.
Yeah, the whole Oubliette is painted in him.
In parts of him. And so she recovers, she goes upstairs, her brother's there, her personal security is there, and they're all right, we'll figure out what's happening. They start a little bit of an investigation. The planetary defense force gets involved a little bit, but her brother is an arbiter, so he's it's weird that someone tried to kill you, but I'm not really allowed to help because of conflict of interest, so I'm not really investigating. And she's okay, whatever. Good. She doesn't want him to be investigating because she just let out a demon.
Yep.
And then, life goes on, and she does get better in a couple days. She's got to go downstairs and clean up bits of Lostrovsky, which is a kind of weird and a little bit creepy scene.
Yeah, she's got
a bucket, and she's oh, that could be an arm, but I'm not sure. It's very interesting. And Jasubiel is out, and they start trying to figure out what's happening. And they get it narrowed down to the person who sent this assassin is probably Tanzeg. And they figure that out kind of at a party at her house, which is a big deal for sort of seating the new planetary governor, because he disappears and starts doing something spooky. He's trying to spy in her house.
Which he does.
Yes.
He finds the Oubliette and goes down there.
Yeah, and he goes down there and he escapes. He goes down there and leaves, and she's oh crap. We have to, 1, he already tried to kill me. 2, he knows there's an Oubliette and I might go to prison for having one because you're not supposed to be doing demon stuff. We're in the Imperium. And so she gives Jasubiel permission to go chase him, but she does it in a terrible way because in her household, she's had sort of a head kitchen maid person who was there when her and her brother were children. And her brother is kind of the black sheep of the family. She had another brother who died with her father, which also that might have been an assassination.
I think it's just because this brother is 20 years younger.
Yeah, and he's also the spare. She's the heir. She's only the heir because she had an older brother who died. Heir. She's the spare, and he's the spare.
Yeah.
Right, and so they sent him off to arbiter school or whatever.
The Schola Progenium, which was then you become an arbiter.
Yeah, and so she has to give
arbitrator.
Arbitrator? Yeah. She has to give another blood sacrifice for Jasubiel to kill Tanzeg Van Niesen. And in the process of Lostrovsky chasing her and trying to kill her, before it was downstairs in the Oubliette, it was upstairs, like in her kitchen, and the maid like got in the way and got hurt and is like kind of in
a coma.
Yeah, and so she smothers her to death with a pillow, and that's when you know things are going downhill for Ashiel.
Well, so what was interesting is following that scene, Jasubiel goes to her and goes like, wow, that was really crazy of you, because you could have chosen literally anyone, like a villain or someone else.
A like random stranger in the street. Like you chose your brother's basically mother figure who was in a coma for trying to save your life. You smothered her to death, and she's like, I'm not terrible. It was just convenient, which so you could argue that.
I can see how like her rationale so slowly gets more and more crazy.
Yeah.
However, I still feel like the pacing of this book went a little 0 to 100, especially near the ending. This book really could have used another like 50 or 60 pages just to show her Ashiel's downfall a little more.
Yeah. Basically, she goes from cutting off the tip of her finger to murdering her brother's best friend. Like, it's a wild, and it's like over the span of like a week and a half. To then murdering her personal servant later. So later she's out and about, and like they need to kill someone else. I don't even know who that person is at this.
He was the chauffeur.
No, I know who she kills, but who did Jasubiel kill?
Oh, that was to kill Tanzik.
No, I thought smothering the lady was to kill Tanzik.
Or was that
There's a lot of smothering people that she loves.
No, who did she?
I think it was soldiers who were chasing her. There's a chasing scene.
Right, the soldiers.
So also she's trying to figure out what a skitterling is, what's happening, so she goes and talks to like the head of the religion of the imperial cult on their homeworld, and they do a little bit of digging in the archives or whatever, and there are paintings of skitterlings, and we get this kind of idea that probably all noble houses before Shokin was folded into the Imperium were noble and rich because they made deals with these demons that gave them power and got rid of their enemies. And obviously when the Imperium came, all of those noble houses supposedly got wiped out, and we restarted from scratch with people who don't deal with demons. But that's not exactly true, because this Oubliette's in her basement, and clearly her father knew about it, right? And so it's been a thing in her family. And so she knows this, but also while she's visiting that church and talking to that sort of pastor, there are assassins who are chasing her, and she's with her driver, who's been her driver her whole life and was part of their family. And he gets shot in the arm trying to protect her or whatever. And she calls on Jasubiel to save her, and I think he has to kill those people, which gets her to safety, but she owes him a dead person. So then she sneaks into this dude's room while he's recovering and murders him also. There's a lot of her murdering her friends.
Yep.
And so then the Van Niessens are still after them. Irina and the mom are still after them. And she really has to decide whether or not this is going to be a thing. Like, am I going to just give in and use this demon to save Shokin? And she decides yes, and that's kind of the whole story. We never even get to see the killing of Irina Van Niesen or Asilia.
So basically, she goes down, and there are other skitterlings. We learn near the end that Jasubiel is a mandrake, which is sort of an ally of the Drukhari. Like, it's a Dark Eldar. They live in a realm called Alendrak that is sort of part of the Webway and part of not, sort of a shadow dimension. And Ashiel decides to like formalize the pact that was originally made centuries ago before the Imperium came to allow all of these mandrakes to come back, now semi under her control.
Yeah, and there is this little bit of a cool backstory that we're not focusing on about like how the Shokins controlled the skitterlings and what that was like, and it has to do with this crystal that grows on Shokin called Slayanite or Sayanite, which is orange. I
completely forgot about that.
Yeah, and it's in her ring. There's like a signet ring of the office of planetary governor, and there's this whole background when she's meeting with the preacher that's like, we used to be rich in Slayanite crystals. It used to be everywhere. You can see it in art, and now really clear, clean, pure Sayanite crystals are missing, except for this one that's in your ring. And so like she knows that she has this potential power of control over the skitterlings. And so she goes down there with Jezebel and like formalizes that pact, and so I guess in theory we're about to see Shokin fall to the Drukhari.
Possibly. It's an interesting thing, because at the start of the book there's a little administratum, like, prologue of administratum officials coming to, like, check on the tithe grade of Shokin, and basically saying, like, oh, it's producing much better than expected, we're thinking of upping its tithe grade, that because it's producing more. At the end of the book they go back and check, and they basically say, nope, never mind, it's fallen back to what it was before. Mm-hmm. So almost to say, like, under Ashiel's father, it was doing so much better, and she has returned it back to, what it was before.
Yeah.
Under sort of Mandrake watch control. And there is a final, like, slaughter scene in which she unleashes the Skitterlings upon the Venetians family.
Yeah.
And we don't really get to see it.
You don't get to see the murder. It's very, like, this is going to be terrible and bloody and gross, and, like, you're super hyped up for it, and then you don't get to see it. It's a little bit anticlimactic.
It's a disappointing end, if I'm honest.
Yeah. And in my reading through my notes, I did figure out how she killed her driver, whose name was Chester, spelled with a Y. She called Jezubel because he's free. Like, he's out and about. So she just has to say, yo, Jezubel, and he shows up, and she's like, can you kill that dude? And he's like, yeah, sure, if you kill that dude.
Right. So I picked up on Jezubel being some sort of Dark Eldar Drukhari related thing really early.
It took me a while, even though I've written about them, apparently.
The reason is, in the early scenes when he's, like, after the initial murder, and he's thinking about, like, oh, now I can feel all of this suffering around me.
That is,
like,
very Drukhari.
That is how the Drukhari operate.
Yeah.
They literally sustain themselves off of suffering.
That's right. And there's him a lot of talking about, like, he knows that lady who the, like, cook lady that she suffocated in her sleep, because he's been sort of existing on little crumbs of suffering, and so, like, that lady gets down on her
off
knees.
Of her arthritis.
Yeah, like, she has this terrible arthritis. She gets on her knees and scrubs floors. Chester, her driver, also has, like, really bad, he has, like, gout in his feet, and, like, sometimes it's so bad that, like, he just sleeps in the carriage that he drives her in because getting out of it is too painful for his gout, but they would never tell her that. And she's like, oh, I can't believe I would have never noticed that. But that's one of those, because you're evil moments. But, like, it's very, I would describe this book generally as subtle.
Yeah, but...
Tanzek's murder is not subtle. And
Tanzek's murder is not subtle. He's literally tied up with strips of his own flesh.
Skin and, like, open such that his, like, rib cage is out, but also he's still alive when they find him.
That is classic Drukhari.
It's very good and very not subtle, but the rest of the book I would describe it as sort of subtle.
I will say, thinking on it, I've never heard of Drukhari sustaining themselves on chronic pain.
Okay.
As opposed to, like, inflicting
torment,
pain. I was like, well, obviously it wouldn't be that great for them, but the fact that it's, like, it's something
it's
is not nothing. Something I ever would have thought of. So that is cool.
Yeah, I would say overall I enjoyed it, and it gave me good, spook ambiance for Halloween month.
Yeah.
But, like, it wasn't super scary, and I don't love a political intrigue, so I was like,
a lot of
all that.
The book, in, like, structure and in sort of, like, broad similarities, it reminds me a lot of House of Knight and Chains,
but not as scary.
Which was David Andel. It's also set on an agri world, also about a planetary governor coming back to take over, about going up against another noble house that is believed to be in control of all of the illegal stuff.
Yep.
House of Knight and Chains is a better horror book.
It's scary. Yeah, they're definitely scary.
The political side of this book and just the development of the world is great in this book.
Yeah.
Not a horror book.
Yeah,
sorry.
It's not that scary.
It's just not.
But I enjoyed reading it.
Yes, I did too.
And then we'll be back soon.
We'll be back soon with Outgunned by Denny Flowers.
Right.
Which I'm incredibly excited about.
You're so thrilled.
I love Denny Flowers. I read Fire Made Flesh, which was a Necromunda one, and this author's characters for me are so fleshed out and feel so nuanced. You know, so that's what I'm really excited for.
Okay, we'll see how it goes. All right. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.